Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of All Access AM. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us. We've got a ton to get to on the show today, so thrilled to have you guys here with us. Just going to be one of those shows where we hit on what happened in the ACC tournament, what we got on this Wednesday, day 2 of the ACC tournament, but also coaching changes continue to come down the pipeline in the ACC. Of course, we talked on Monday about Georgia Tech and Boston College making their moves. One of the guys we didn't talk about, Adrian Autry at Syracuse. He is expected to be let go from the Orange. Announcement, according to John Rothstein, expected today. So we are watching that. That's been confirmed by our crew at On3 and multiple people across the industry now, and was kind of expected as well. And this is a job that is going to be one of the more interesting ones to watch in this coaching carousel cycle, where you have such a program of history and tradition and all of those things, but at the same time, now you have the realities of NIL, and I have some thoughts on that as well with what Red Autry had to say after SMU beat Syracuse in the first round of the ACC tournament, a big win for the Mustangs. We'll talk about the bubble as well, and how that went on day 1 of the ACC. Is, you know, 1 out of 3 took care of business in a sense for that. But we'll talk with Mike McAllister at 9:30. He covers Syracuse for 24/7 Sports. He's a good friend of the show. He'll be on. We'll chat Syracuse with him. Adrian Autry, maybe slip in a couple of questions about how the football team is doing as well. And I have some thoughts on as well the overall landscape of this ACC tournament as we're seeing it unfold. By the time we end this show, it'll be very, very close to tip-off time for round 2 of the ACC tournament. It'll get going at 11 a.m. Central Time on ESPN, with 4 games up for grabs this morning into the afternoon, so to speak, with an evening with games going all the way to tip off at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. So thrilled to have you guys with us on All Access AM. Do me a favor, please. Subscribe to our channel, All Access AM. There's the QR code for you up in the top corner of your screen. If you're watching on your computer or if you're watching wherever, just make sure you hit that subscribe button for us on YouTube. That's where it helps us the most. Of course, we'd love to grow our Twitter following. So hopefully you guys watching on Twitter, wherever you are, continue to enjoy what we got going on here at All Access AM. This is a ton of fun for us to do day in, day out. And it is one of those things that we're watching the ACC family help grow it. And that's a lot of fun too. So we have a lot to talk about on today's show, and thrilled to have you with us, and thrilled to have one of our key sponsors, of course, presenting our Wednesday show, and that is OPW Solutions. Guess what, guys? After we got done with our show on Monday, I snuck out, did a little me day in a sense, or at least middle of the day, and played golf with our friend AJ Crow of OPW Solutions. And he's so excited about what he's got going on. And I was talking with him. I said, how's business going? And he said, look, we got through snow and ice control for our businesses, and we thought there might be a little bit of a break. Sometimes there's a little bit of a lull in that business world for him on making sure people's landscaping is all ready to go. But no, just the way the weather has been, it's jumped right back into that just whole, all right, servicing the yards and making sure all the businesses are looking sharp and up and running and all of that. So you have a good aesthetically pleasing exterior for your customers to walk up to. His crew has just gotten right back into it. And that is kind of rare, he said. Usually I kind of have a little bit of a breathing room before the spring is truly sprung. But in his area, North Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, exciting things happening. I know they're continuing to grow their team as well. So they've got commercial landscaping, power washing, snow and ice control, as well as that fence repair. That might be something to take a look at after, some of these winter storms have maybe rolled through your area. Make sure you do it with our friends at OPW Solutions. Go to opwsolutions.com or give them a call at 214-444-2305 today and tell them All Access AM sent you. All right, we continue on All Access AM. Let's jump into the games from Tuesday. Let's do that because I know we're gonna have Mike McAllister on at 9:30. Excited to have him join us. He's been a great friend of the show for a long time. Jerry Morphew, I'm really excited about today's game. Good morning, Billy. And Jerry, SMU is one of those teams that has gotten over that hump of their skid for sure. A 4-game losing streak to end the regular season. Well, they get back on the right side of things with an 86-69 win over Syracuse Tuesday in the middle game of the ACC Tournament first round. And they do it with a 25-point night from Boopy Miller. They also got a huge outing from Jaden Toombs, the highly touted freshman who had a double-double, was kind of on triple-double watch. And now, because of this win, SMU gets to play Louisville in the second round. And a Louisville team, and we'll preview this game in just a moment, but a Louisville team that is going to be missing Michael Brown. That game at 1:30 p.m. Central on ESPN, and a major opportunity there for SMU to really, I think, kind of maybe close the door on what is an NCAA tournament bid. You know, it got certainly it is dicey as it stands because they're on the bubble. They are the last 4 in. They're part of the first 4 group, according to Joe Lunardi and all the bracketologists that we follow, including our own James Fletcher. And that is a good spot to be in coming off of that first day. They needed that win. They needed to get over that hump, so to speak, and they were able to do that. And when you look at SMU and you look at what they've been able to accomplish this season, the 4-game skid has been dramatically difficult on this team without having BJ Edwards in the fold. He's probably not going to play in the second round against Louisville today. And now that they've gotten that win, and you saw Virginia Tech and Stanford lose on Tuesday, it makes a lot more sense, I think, to see SMU maybe not push it with him. Like almost play the numbers game of, hey, we're without BJ Edwards. We're still a good team. We just had to figure ourselves out. And I still think this is a very different conversation if SMU makes half of their free throws at Cal and they come away with a win. It just has a different feeling of a 3-game slide versus a complete destruction. And then you had the games play out the way they did down the stretch. But look, the committee is going to look at that team sheet and they're going to see a 4-game skid. And they're going to see losses to teams that, between being on the bubble and Cal and Stanford at those points, and then Miami, who's a top 25 team, and a Florida State team that is playing as well as anybody, it seems like, really down the stretch, even though they lost on Saturday to Louisville at home without Michael Brown playing for Louisville. It's still or excuse me, that was Miami that lost at home against Louisville. But Florida State, they're playing as well as anybody. But when you look at what SMU lost to, I mean, they're losing to teams that are competitive. And so for them to get back on the right side and beat a Syracuse team that they really should have found a way to beat up on the road earlier this year, but they didn't. They came up short, and a really difficult loss for that team when it happened. But SMU was able to come away with a win. That was most important. They went into halftime with a lead. That was their first lead in almost 3 full games. Not the singular moment halftime lead, but just having a lead at various points throughout the first half. And then in the second half, the offense took off and SMU just pulled away. And that's in part because Deron Pierre Jr. kind of woke up. Boopy Miller, Jaden Toombs really had an impressive game as a whole and just what they were able to do. Jaden Toombs had a double-double at the half. Samet Yigitolu finished with 12 points, 11 rebounds, so he had a double-double. All 5 starters for SMU finished in double figures. SMU had 0 points from the bench. So they worked their starting 5. But here's the thing. Here's the difference. And Andy Enfield, I think, did a really nice job of managing this. The only starter that played above 36 minutes was Deron Pierre Jr. He played 39. And I think that was interesting because at various points throughout this season watching SMU, Andy Enfield has sat Deron Pierre down, and when things aren't going well, when they're taking, ill-advised shots or turning the ball over, which he did in the first half a couple times. And then you get some poor defensive play at times from this team as a whole. He didn't do that with Jean Pierre this game for whatever reason. And he just let him play his way through some of those things. And it took off in the second half for him. With Boopy Miller, he was able to get him out. He got him about 4 minutes of rest. He was able to, get Semet Yigitolu 5 minutes of rest. He got Jaden Toombs 7 minutes of rest. And I know those numbers seem small, and some of you who watch other teams that don't wear out their guys like that. SMU just doesn't have a bench that can bring anything to the table right now. They did get Sam Walters back, and that helped. He had 5 minutes on the night. He didn't take a shot. He didn't turn the ball over. He didn't do any of those things that sometimes will negatively impact a game in such a way where, that's a wasted possession or this or that. They were able to almost hide him a little bit. And Jermaine O'Neal Jr. came off the bench. He didn't have any points. He was 0 for 2 from the field, but he had a couple steals. He had a rebound, just able to do a little bit in a little bit of a different role. I thought the adjustment to the big lineup for SMU, that's the lineup that I thought they were going to roll with this season. And I think, this is my opinion, as SMU would, if they're able to advance in this tournament, even if BJ Edwards comes back, SMU needs to stick with that lineup. That starting five. That's what it was going to be before the season, before Jaden Toombs got hurt. And then you have the BJ Edwards emergence, and so they're not going to switch away from that. Their starting five during the regular season was one of the most dominant, group of lineups in the country. So you do have to weigh that. But when you get into the tournament and there's that kind of grind, you're playing every other night if they can get in, and especially when you're looking at today, if BJ Edwards was even remotely able to give you 5 minutes, you're looking at a lineup that gives you that size advantage that I think SMU really could have used throughout the season. And if Jaden Toombs is going to play like that, or at least give you that opportunity to have a game like that, you're in such a good situation there. So I think SMU has to really take a look at that and see if that's something that they want to go down that road with, and see if that's worth pursuing, because it was that good. I felt like it's a really, really talented group. It's just unproven together. So that's something that SMU is going to have to think about if they get into the NCAA tournament, assuming they do, and they're able to get a player like BJ Edwards back. I know the first inclination for Andy Enfield and the staff is going to be, okay, well, let's put out what got us here. And I think that's not necessarily the right move. And I've been watching this team potentially take some changes or have opportunities to make changes and then see how they go. This is that opportunity. I think I really do. I think they should go with this lineup, even with BJ Edwards coming back. I just think it gives you a size advantage at all 5 spots outside of Boopy, and it just gives you a different feel. And SMU had an improved, display of defensive, efficiency in a sense too, holding Syracuse to 69 points. They shot 26% from 3-point range. It's not necessarily a team that's like, oh, wow, look at that, but it's a start. That's where the defense has been all year for SMU. They'll face Louisville. Michael Brown was kind of still coming off his injury earlier this year when they played in the first time. SMU lost at Louisville. Really disappointing game. SMU didn't share the ball at all. That was kind of the story. I think they had something like 17 turnovers. It was an insane number of turnovers, I think, up there at Louisville in that loss. And then Louisville comes to Dallas, and SMU pulls away and ends up winning by 10 in a big game for their resume, as that was a top 25 win for the Mustangs as well. And they get this rematch in the rubber match at 1:30 p.m. Central on ESPN today. And without Michael Brown, likely without BJ Edwards in this game, both teams are going to have to need players to step up. Both teams are very safe, or excuse me, should run that back real quick. Louisville is very safe in terms of the NCAA tournament. SMU with a win over Louisville in this game, I would think would punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament, barring a bunch of other bid stealers here down the stretch. But they've just got to get through this one and find a way to make that one happen. So I'm intrigued to see how that game plays out. It's a game that should be a lot of fun to watch. It should be up and down, and I think we're in for a treat if that's the case. So we'll certainly keep an eye on all of these matchups. Four of them. NC State versus Pitt leads us off at 11 a.m. Central. Florida State against Cal, 6 p.m. Central Time on ESPN2. And then Clemson takes on Wake Forest in the 8:30 p.m. Central Time game on ESPN2. So how'd we get there? Well, an incredible game to kick off the ACC tournament as Pitt took down Stanford and burst their bubble. 64-63. Pitt gets a putback at the buzzer as DeMarco Minor made that basket on the rebound to send Stanford back to the West Coast with their bubble burst, going to the NIT without a doubt, assuming they accept and all of that type of stuff. Ibuka Okorie held to just 14 points. I mean, it was rough. And here's the issue, right? When you play the ACC tournament in Charlotte for Stanford, and I'm interested to see how it goes for Cal. Cal's got the extra day, but you have this travel from the West Coast all the way to the ACC tournament. I wonder how all of that played out. Like if Stanford, when they wrapped up against NC State, if they stayed. I don't know. I don't cover Stanford on a day-to-day basis, but if you played at NC State on Saturday, did you just stay out there? And maybe somebody in the chat, if they want to do some research as we're sitting here and find out, that would be awesome. But you have that game that finished out there on the East Coast at NC State, and then for Cal, you finished at Wake Forest in their regular season finale. So I would hope that they've been out there for a minute now, that they didn't fly back and then fly back on Monday. I can't imagine they did it that way, but still, you're kind of off of your time zone in a sense. This is a full-blown kind of away game setting, and Stanford just wasn't able to do anything. Again, 14 points for Okorie, 5 of 10 from the field. Just really, Pitt stepped up defensively. I mean, they did a really, really nice job. Stanford just looked kind of like they were nervous in a sense. Like the way they played, they didn't play with any aggression in a sense. They really didn't do anything that was like overly impressive. I thought that Pitt had a really, really good game plan for slowing down Okorie and what they were able to do in that respect, and they come away with a win. And the sad part is there's really not much more to say because Stanford's going to go to the NIT or get a bid to the NIT now. Pitt, Jeff Capel, what's his future? Does this delay that for another day? That's a question that I have, of course, and we'll see how their game plays out later today against Florida State or not against Florida State, but against NC State, another team that's been on a skid as of late. But Pitt was able to burst Stanford's bubble, and they weren't the only ACC team that got their bubble burst. Wake Forest beat Virginia Tech 95-89. And look, we talked about on the show how Wake Forest doesn't have the resources, doesn't seem to have the want to right now to be back to some of the level of basketball that they've enjoyed at various moments throughout the history of their program. But they won they've won now 3 of their last 4 since the news that Steve Forbes is returning. I think they lost the first game. I think they lost to Boston College when the news broke where he was going to return. And then they beat Syracuse. They lost to Virginia. They beat Cal, and then they beat Virginia Tech. So they're kind of on a little bit of a roll, and certainly have an opportunity. And I think with this chance to play a Clemson team that didn't necessarily close incredibly well down the stretch, is the Clemson team that Wake has already beaten this year. So that's something to keep an eye on. Clemson's sitting there 22-9 as a whole. They're in the NCAA tournament safely, but this is a team that is entering today having lost 5 of their last 7, and they had the extra time off. Sorry, I had a sneeze. And so when you look at this Wake Forest Clemson game, I mean, this is going to be, I think this is going to be a fun game this afternoon, but, or evening, but to go to how Wake was able to get this done, Juke Harris just had 10, but they had, count them up, 7 different players in double figures, incredibly balanced effort. They shot 51% from the field. They shot okay from three, 36%. They made 27 of their 30 free throws, 90% on the day. They were able to limit their turnovers. Virginia Tech, on the other hand, had 13. They just shot just 41% from the field, and not enough free throw making in a sense at 23 of 27. But what a ref fest this ended up being. But for Wake, they've shown a lot of fight down the stretch for Steve Forbes to kind of show that it was the right move to keep him and kind of make people like me look a little silly in a sense. But still, they have a chance now where they can make a little bit of noise here, maybe not ruin some seasons, because you've got a chance to put together a like, if you play Clemson, you're beating a team that's in the NCAA tournament. You're not going to ruin their season in a sense. You'll ruin their chances of winning an ACC tournament championship, but they're already in the tournament. But Wake has a little bit of something to them. So I'm really intrigued to see how they play against a team like Clemson that they've beaten already this season. They're going to play them on a neutral site, and we'll see how it goes. But man, this game was a lot of fun. As the overtime session got underway, and we saw so much action there in that, and they were able to come away with it to close out the night with Miles Colvin leading the way with 18 points, and it was just a really, really fun basketball game. A great first day of ACC tournament play, and this now pops the bubble for Virginia Tech as well. So they'll probably be going to the NIT again. For Mike Young, just almost not good enough. And we'll talk about Adrian Autry here in just a minute with Mike McAllister, who's going to join the show. But similar to a Wake Forest, similar to all these jobs that are opening, and a lot of the conversation around these jobs, there's not the resources just aren't there. And they can't be serious, or as serious as they want to be, about basketball right now because of NIL, because of what the funding is needed to do it at a high level. So there are some ACC teams that we saw the wake up with an NC State, hiring a Will Wade, a UNC doubling down on Hubert Davis roster building efforts and doing all of those things. We need some ACC teams here to say we want to get serious about basketball again. How do we do that? How do we get above the cap money? How do we build that roster value? Those are all things I'm infatuated as watching this business unfold. But the ACC is such a good league, and they're going to get probably 8 teams in the tournament here, assuming SMU can sneak in there, and that's great for the league. But it's almost like the league's doing it with a little bit of, like, for some teams, like a hand tied behind their back. You know what I mean? Like Clemson being in a tournament team, doesn't shock me. Miami in year one, Jay Lucas, like that's impressive. We know that they have money. The teams at the top of this league are putting together rosters with money, and for this ACC, off season, I think that's going to be one of the conversations around the portal is how do teams create that extra value for their roster building efforts. And one team that's going to be doing that is Syracuse, and they're going to have to find a way. And we'll get to Mike McAllister in just a second as he's going to join the show. But first, got to remind you guys about our friends at the La La Land Foundation, and they are a huge partner for us. We're so excited to do a lot of things this year with them. Some announcements coming down the pipeline with them, but as young adults transform into full-blown adulthood from the foster care system, there's that guidance, that help. That's what the La La Land Foundation helps provide. And whether it be monetary donations, in-kind donations, corporate sponsorships, there's mentorship opportunities. You can volunteer. There's so many things that you can do with our friends at the La La Land Foundation. It's all about spreading kindness. It's all about building the next generation up in this country and really help them accomplish their dreams and goals and get to where they want to be. And to do that, sometimes you just need a helping hand. And that's the great thing about La La Land Foundation is it's all just built on kindness. So that's what they encourage. And that's what we encourage you to do is go to lalalandfoundation.com and learn more about how you can get involved today. So we appreciate all of you guys who have done that so far this year, and we'll continue to share all the good news around what they're doing in the space. So we appreciate them. And now really excited to be joined by one of my good friends in the industry, Mike McAllister, covers Syracuse for 24/7 Sports. Mike, how you doing this morning? It's coaching search season.
It sure is. Yeah, we'll say good friends, even though you abandoned us at 24/7, but that's okay. That's okay.
Hey, I love being able to reach out now because it seems like all of the weapons are starting to be put down across this industry. Despite
oh my gosh, the craziness between the wars back and forth and the comments and the jabs, and I'm just like, come on, people, like let's. I don't know. We've got enough competition like up here at Syracuse. I get along with pretty much everyone in media. There's plenty of room for everybody, so there's no need for any of that. But it's nice that most of the people that I had relationships with at 24/7 that have left to go over to Rivals on 3, that I still have good relationships with, and you still feel comfortable calling them if I want to bounce an idea off them or have a discussion with them. So I think most of the time that's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah. And look, a lot of discussion around Syracuse now, and I had to reach out to you. 49-48 in 3 seasons for Adrian Autry. Doesn't get it done. They don't go to the NCAA tournament in his time, and Syracuse is going to move on. What's your initial reaction to the news that Red Autry's out?
Not surprising. I think most that follow Syracuse had expected that to be the case, as kind of was obvious with the season going along that that's kind of the way it was going to go. And ironically, after they won that game against SMU, they didn't win the rest of the year, and then SMU ends up getting revenge and ending the season. But I put this stat out shortly after the game ended last night that Syracuse beat Florida State early in the season, early in the ACC schedule, and improved to 12-5. And at that point, they had a resume that was, I would say bubble worthy. And they had the win over Tennessee, played Houston really tough without Donnie Freeman, who's considered their best player. But since that point, they went 3-12 in the last 15 games. And when you're at a place like Syracuse with the tradition you have and everything else, you mentioned that they didn't go to the tournament during his 3 years. They haven't been to the tournament since 2021. So it's been 5 years since they've been to March Madness. And when you put all of that together, it just wasn't enough. Fans were upset. Attendance was way down. You have to figure if he were to come back that the NIL money wouldn't be there. So it's just a tough situation. He's a great guy by all accounts. I thought very highly of him as a person as well. I've always enjoyed my discussions with him. And, he's an alum, was a great player, longtime assistant coach. So when that guy fails, when he's one of your own, obviously it hits a little bit different.
And as Syracuse gets into this coaching search, it is going to be fascinating to see how it unfolds for them. Any hot names that are jumping out right at you? I know there's another former Syracuse team member that is getting all the kind of hype right now.
Yeah, Jerry McNamara at Siena is certainly going to be on the names to watch, and I think he's going to have multiple power conference opportunities for the job that he's done there, turning around a team that won 4 games a year before he got there. They win 14 in year 1. Year 2, they win the conference tournament and make the NCAA tournament. It's been quite a 2 years in terms of what he's been able to do there. But he's one of the names. I think some others that you'll hear are Brian Hodgson from South Florida, the South Florida head coach. He's done a really good job down there after doing a nice job at Arkansas State. Is formerly Nate Oates' top recruiting assistant at Alabama and at Buffalo. He was born in Olean, New York, so just a few hours from Syracuse. And, the story goes that he did grow up a Syracuse fan. So if assuming all that is true, then, you've got someone who understands what Syracuse basketball is supposed to be, and is not too far from where Syracuse is located in terms of family and friends and all that. I think Tony Skinn is an interesting name from George Mason. And Gerard Calhoun from Utah State is kind of an interesting one. He's kind of a little bit more of an outside the box guy. Joe Gallo from Merrimack, the team that lost to Jerry McNamara in the MAAC Conference Championship game. He's an interesting one. He's been at Merrimack for a while, but is considered a good head coach and still only 46 years old. So it could be interesting if he was looking to move up. And then just a couple of assistants at UConn. Luke Murray, who's the son of comedian and actor Bill Murray, is UConn's offensive coordinator and has been the offensive coordinator since, including during the 2 back-to-back national championship years. And then the associate head coach at UConn, Kamani Young. He's 52. He's been an assistant for 15, 16 years, something like that. At various spots, but has been attached to has been with Dan Hurley for quite a while. You wonder if he's going to be looking to be a head coach in his own right, and if now could be a potential time to explore that option.
And is there a sense around the athletic department? I mean, how the AD search is going, and what that all is looking like and playing a factor into this one?
The NIL situation
Or the AD?
Oh, the AD situation. Yeah. So with the AD situation, my understanding is that the call to move on from Autry was John Wildak's decision. I think they're close to making an announcement for who the new AD is going to be, and I think that new person will be the person that's leading the committee to make the decision on who the new head coach is going to be. That's my understanding of how that's going to play out. But certainly when you have, they've had a change in the chancellor, the current AD announced his retirement effective July 1st. And so they currently have a committee together trying to find who the new AD is going to be. So when you have all of that as the backdrop, of course, that complicates, this entire process. But I think they'll put a committee together. I'm sure they kind of already have an idea of who that committee is going to be comprised of, and they'll do a search, do their due diligence, and try to find the person that they think is the best fit for Syracuse.
You mentioned the NIL situation. I know it was a large focal point yesterday at the press conference post game with Adrian Autry, and probably has been a huge talking point up there among the media crew and the fan base. This is a historic job. This is one of the top fan bases, top jobs in college basketball, and you should be able to kind of get whoever you want in a sense when a job like this opens. But in today's day and age of NIL, where does that piece stand, and how does Q's raise that money that is needed to not only try to be successful with Fran Brown leading the football team, but have Syracuse basketball back on the map?
Yeah, what's interesting is there was a report that came out that said that the roster this year, it took somewhere between $8 and $9 million to put together, and that was, I think, middle of the pack in the ACC. I think you can function on that if you have a coach that has been a winner and is a proven winner. That can certainly help you. But the report also said that was triple what they had the year before. And that means that Syracuse basketball was dealing with about $3 million of NIL money to put a roster together. And that's like back end of all power conference teams. That's really low on the totem pole, and makes it very difficult for any coach. So I think the attractiveness of Syracuse as a job, as a head coaching position, is there because of the brand, because of the history, as you mentioned. But any potential candidate that comes in, that's going to be the question that they're going to have answered in order for them to accept a job, which is, what is the NIL situation going to be, not only for next year, but for the foreseeable future, so that I make sure that we can put a competitive roster together every single year. Because what you don't want to do is be middle to back end of your conference year in and year out in NIL revenue. Syracuse needs to get up into the top, I don't know, 5 or 6 in the conference in NIL revenue, so that they can use that to put a roster together that will get them into a similar spot in the standings. That certainly is going to be a focal point. And I think all the donors internally are having discussions on which coaches they like, who they'd be willing to back, and all that's going to play a major role in how this search plays out as well.
And when you factor that backdrop in with the AD search, I mean, is there kind of that lead dog group of donors that wants to try to make this happen, that are picking up the ball and kind of running with it, from what you're hearing up there?
So I've heard that there's some donors that back certain candidates, or have at least an early backing of certain candidates. But I know there's one donor, or it's a husband and a wife. A lot of the football facilities have been named after them. They're the Lally complex. John Lally, who's a former Syracuse football player, he and his wife are huge backers of athletics and the football program, and they contribute to other sports as well. But they haven't really done much with basketball. I know there's been a lot of discussion around them, mainly surrounding a guy that I mentioned earlier, Brian Hodgson, because they live in Florida, and the Lallies do, and they have season tickets to various South Florida sports, including basketball. And so they have a relationship with Brian Hodgson. So the theory was, if you get him, now you've got one of your top football donors that could potentially also, give you some financial support in basketball, which, could give you a big bump in terms of how much you have at your disposal from an NIL standpoint. Other than them and that sort of theory about how that could work, there hasn't really been any specific, this person wants this, or this person would give this to that, or anything like that. Nothing concrete. There's been some rumors about certain people backing potential candidates, but nothing concrete. I just know internally from what I've heard, there are some that have certain candidates that they like, and have told the administration, if this guy is brought in, then I'm willing to continue to give what I have been, and or bump that up a little bit as well.
And just from a pure basketball perspective, where did it go wrong for Adrian Autry? What does the next head coach need to bring to the table for Q's?
Yeah, I think NIL is a part of it. I think he was put in a bad spot right from the start, and sort of set him up to fail in some respects, because they were so far behind in NIL, but other things around the program as well. Like, they just got a GM for the first time this offseason. So that would be something that should have been in place prior to that, right? And so having to go through 2 years of not having that, and putting them at a disadvantage compared to other programs. And then, there's certain things from an X's and O's standpoint. You can look at substitution patterns and things like that. The offensive scheme has gotten a lot of comments from the Syracuse fans, claiming that they don't run any plays or anything like that. But that's a bit of hyperbole. That's a bit of overstating things. But their offensive system involves a lot of flow and a lot of feel, and it's sort of the longer you play together, then the better you get within that offense. And given the nature of modern college basketball, with so much roster turnover, so much more roster turnover than it used to be 10, 20, 30 years ago, it's a lot more difficult to run an offense that's based off of that, because you no longer have the players that sit for a couple of years and are going through all this stuff in practice and developing and etc. You no longer have players that play together for 2, 3, 4 years. It's almost like everything's a 1-year thing, and you've got so many moving pieces every single year, that having that cohesive unit of a junior and senior laden team that have played together for the last 2, 3 years, you don't really have that much anymore at this level, because players are moving so much, and it's impacted mid majors as well, because when you have those good mid major players, they're leaving a lot earlier to jump up to the high major level. So I think all of those factors certainly played a part in it. And Autry was also a first-time head coach, and there's a couple of things there, right? So sometimes coaches develop just like players do, and it's going to take some time before he, becomes a really good head coach. It just like players, it takes some time to become a really good player. There's also the possibility that some people just aren't head coaches, right? We see this in every sport. Vic Fangio for my Philadelphia Eagles is an excellent defensive coordinator, was not a great head coach. And so that's just how some people are. They're great in those roles. And maybe that's what it is for Red. We'll see. I hope he gets another head coaching opportunity because, like I said, he's a great guy at some point. But he'll land on his feet somewhere. He's a great recruiter, very highly respected in terms of, what type of person he is. So I think he'll be okay. But ultimately, all of those factors are where it went wrong.
A couple more for you, and I want to switch gears and we'll get you out of here because I know you're busy, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Fran Brown and how Syracuse is doing heading into spring ball in the near future with, I was super high on what Syracuse was doing. Steve Angeli gets hurt, the season falls apart, and they make a bunch of changes. It seems like on the coaching staff, there's, all of this and that going on. I thought it was a little, kind of like quick trigger to do that with losing like a franchise quarterback and the level he was playing. But nonetheless, just how is the Fran Brown era going from your vantage point, and is Steve Angeli on track to be back?
I think the plan is for Steve Angeli to be back. I haven't heard anything that said that there's been any type of setback for him, but it just kind of overall, as far as how things are with Fran Brown, I still think that he's got the support of the fan base, he's got the support of the donors, and all that. But even though they made a lot of changes, most of them were on the defensive side of the ball, and even in year one, when they were good and they won 10 games, and we all know the Kyle McCord story and all that, the defense still had a lot of issues. And so I think this was more so of taking a look and saying, we're 2 years in, the defense isn't performing the way we want. We just had a really poor season. This is a good opportunity for me to sort of, make those changes now and try to get us back on track. So instead of having, a first-time defensive coordinator that was a buddy of his, he's bringing in someone who has been a defensive coordinator for several years and a successful one at Toledo. And then, they changed up a lot of their assistants as well that they think pretty highly of. And I think there's been a little bit of a shift from let's get the best recruiters in here that we can to, yeah, we still want guys to be good at recruiting, but putting more of an emphasis on X's and O's, player development, on the field schematically, things of that nature. So I think there's still some excitement about what they could be next year. The schedule is not quite as daunting with having, 4 or 5 college football playoff teams on your schedule, most of which were on the road. It's nice to not have that on your schedule, but they do still have Notre Dame coming to the Dome. I think fans are excited that if Angeli is back and healthy and playing like he did last year, that they'll have an opportunity to have a good bounce back year.
And last one, just the biggest things that you're watching in spring storylines wise for Syracuse.
I want to see what the other quarterbacks look like. There's been a lot of turnover in that room, and so we know that when you come back from an Achilles injury, you just never know how things are going to go, right? Because you could come back and be theoretically good to go physically, but it still takes time from a mental standpoint and everything else to really get back to 100%. And so if he's not ready to go and or has a re-injury, I want to see that they've got much better options behind him than what they did this past year. I know they thought that Ricky Collins was someone that could come in and play. That proved to not be the case. And then from there, it was sort of throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping something sticks, and it just never did. So they brought in a couple of guys from the transfer portal. They got a freshman that's coming in as well. They still have a couple of guys from last year back. I think they're hoping, that they've got a much deeper quarterback room. So I want to see how that plays out. And then I'm curious what the offensive line looks like. They got a new offensive line coach, Juan Castillo, who has a ton of experience at the NFL and collegiate level. Curious what he does with that offensive line group, and if there's any change in terms of who we kind of expect to be the starters, and who he's looking at. And then I want to see how things work out defensively with a new scheme and a new coordinator, new position coaches all over the place. They brought in a lot of reinforcements, especially in the front seven. I want to see how all that looks, and how guys look like they're adapting to a new defensive system.
Mike McAllister, you are the man covering it all, and we appreciate you doing this on such short notice, and we'll have you back on. I want to hear more about spring ball and how this coaching search goes.
All right, Billy, I appreciate it. Be well.
Yeah, you too. There he goes, Mike McAllister, joining us on All Access AM. Really appreciate his time during a coaching search. And as somebody who just did this, it seems like yesterday now, but it's been 2 full regular seasons. Those early days of the coaching search are your time is limited. Your needs to go and do all sorts of things and chase rumors. And I couldn't imagine doing it without an athletic director at the helm either. So a lot of changes there for Mike and the crew up at Syracuse, but he does a fantastic job, and appreciate his time on All Access AM. Appreciate all of you guys for following us along on here. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow. It helps us when we reach out to guests and say, hey, would you like to come on? And, maybe it's a new guest. Maybe it's somebody that we want to have on from a school, and they look at the channel and they're seeing it grow and they're saying, okay, sure, I'll jump on with you. Let's do it. So those are all the things that help us grow. And we appreciate you guys for, helping support the channel that way. So please subscribe to All Access AM YouTube. Here's where I want to go with the final moments of the show. And we'll be back on Thursday, 8 to 9 a.m. Central Time, 9 to 10 Eastern. We'll have James Fletcher on, I assume, getting bracketology worked out. We'll see if we can do another stop around the ACC on our, spring practice kind of tour, so to speak. But a couple of quick notes here. And we'll start with Duke, but I'm going to start where maybe nobody is thinking about me starting with. But Daniel Jones, the former Duke quarterback, is getting close to a long-term extension with the Indianapolis Colts. That coming out last 24 hours or so. He stepped up and was playing well before suffering a torn Achilles in December. So they are getting closer and closer to that deal. He's going to be a 9-figure man is what it sounds like. So crazy number, crazy bounce back from his time with the Giants to now. So congratulations to him on whatever he ends up getting, because he's going to get paid at a pretty high level, and his career's looking like it's on track now that he's been in Indy. So he's got to take that next step up. It's been kind of a long build for Indianapolis as a whole on the record front, but he's getting there. So that's the price it takes to have a elite quarterback. But more importantly, Duke basketball going to be without Caleb Foster and Pat Ngungba in the ACC tournament. Ngungba's been out for the last couple of weeks now with a foot injury, and with Caleb Foster also, I believe I forgot his injury. I had the tweet lined up, and maybe I've got it here somewhere. But Caleb Foster is our starting point guard, has a fractured foot. He is out for the season, most likely. I can't imagine him being back anytime soon, let alone being back for the first 2 rounds of an NCAA tournament run. So Caden Boozer is going to have to step up in his role, as Duke will eventually play a game in the ACC tournament. They'll be back at it, in the quarterfinals. They'll get into their action, but they'll do so with a new point guard, with Caden Boozer taking over and Pat Ngungba continuing to be out. So Duke is a team that, and this is where I think some of this ACC tournament stuff is so interesting, and it's around the country too. But when you're in, there's no reason it's unless you really want to improve your seating, unless you really, really think you can help yourself in a huge, huge way, you need your team healthy, and that's the day and age of, I think, where we are. And I know you've seen it throughout times and moments of college basketball and kind of playing in that world. But man, it seems like it's elevated a little bit in today's approach to the game and managing, these athletes that are getting paid a bunch of money too by these schools. And Caleb Foster fractured foot. I mean, that's different. But when you look at a Michael Brown and you look at some of the other guys that have been held out, it isn't necessarily surprising with where some of their teams are, but others, they can really help themselves in seeding, or they're okay with just going to the NCAA tournament. And Duke is not necessarily going to be one of those teams. Like, I don't worry in a sense because Duke is so good, in my opinion. But you've got a team that has their ticket punched as a 1 seed somewhere, and really number 1 overall seed, great, cool, whatever. But being a 1 seed in general, like, you're in a great spot. So you don't really have to push it on these guys. You need to hope that you can get them healthy as soon as possible and get them back to your team. But there's not that need to push it and make it over the top. Same with Louisville, Michael Brown. They need Michael Brown in the tournament. He can be a one shining moment type of guy and be that impressive with the way he can play if he's available. So they need him available, get him healthy, and see how it goes. But we get done talking with Mike McAllister covering Syracuse, and came across my timeline. Caden and Cam Boozer signing NIL deals with Samsung. Congratulations to them. Obviously, Cam Boozer is a player of the year, probably the player of the year in the country. And this day and age of college sports, and I use that term a lot, so I apologize for beating it over the head, day and age, but NIL and the space that college basketball and college football are in, it's still pretty astounding in a sense. Like, you look at the way rosters are built, and I think as we get closer and closer to the portal in basketball, and it's always good, and we'll always talk about it and bring it back around when it comes to football. But there was a good story up on On3. Andy Staples talked with Parker Livingstone, who I covered in high school. He's out of Lucas Lovejoy, signs with Texas. He's, grew up a Texas fan. But he, over the offseason, switched up, so to speak, and went to Oklahoma. And this is a guy that was roommates with Arch Manning. And the reason why is because he has an agent, and the agent let him know what the market was for receivers, and Texas wasn't going to play in that space. Texas goes out and grabs Cam Coleman. We know that Cam Coleman was going to absolutely jump a Parker Livingstone in that offense. And so your agent can then advise you and make sure you're informed. And then he enters the portal and he makes a move to Oklahoma. And here's a quote from the agent, Ron Slavin. I think Ron. Yeah, Ron Slavin. And he said, it was evident they didn't value Parker the way other schools did, and it was time to start looking around. And, it is the world of NFL free agency. We're seeing that. We see that. We're all conditioned with it, with the NFL. But then to go look at it in college basketball, and this is where I think basketball is in a scary place. Like, I am not as worried about football. I think for football, it's great. I really do. Like, the current setup, I know there's kind of some mess about things, and the college football playoff and the calendar and the recruiting calendar as a whole. And it's a 2-semester sport now. And what are the actual rules in place for true deals? Or, hey, can we make NIL go more efficient instead of, deals taking at least a week? And even playing in that space of 2 to 3 weeks, those things that hold things up in the quote unquote free agency period, for example. So basketball, to tie this up together, Jamie Shaw released a report, and he talked with a bunch of coaches, and it broke down the market. To get a point guard, to get an elite point guard, it's going to cost you $800,000 to $2 million. To get an elite shooting guard, it's going to cost you $800,000 to $1.5 million. A small forward, a wing, 750 to 1.3, which I think is underrated. I think people are missing the boat there. Any forward, 1.2 million to 2.5 million. Center, 2 million to 3 million. You look at some of these numbers, and it's insane. And I think that in college basketball is creating this divide of a sort where you're seeing some of these rosters be built. And the reality is that some players that are getting the bag to jump up a level, to get to an ACC, to get to a Big 12, an SEC, they're not prepared. They have been the best player on their team for a long time, and they've just been able to kind of do whatever. And then on top of that, they're getting just given a bag of money basically. And you're having to figure out this major change in your life. And in a lot of times you're doing it with 1 year in one place, and you've got eyes on the NBA, and you've got eyes on your next level dreams and all of those things. And I I think for college basketball, they really almost need that type of a guardrail scenario a little bit more because look, guys, add up the math here. When you look relative to the roster size and relative to what most schools, not the Big East, are doing in revenue sharing for college football versus college basketball, I mean, the number is crazy. Like the relative roster size that you're building, and particularly if you're kind of focusing on 10 of the 15 roster spots as money type of positions, you're in a space right now that is creating millionaires across your roster. Whereas football, you're kind of, let's say the quarterback's going to make a pile of money, at a Power 4 school. You're at least getting paid $1 million, and then you've got a couple of key players on your team making $1 million, and you, for the most part, then have to go out and stretch that from revenue sharing to NIL to above the cap NIL and legitimate deals, like we talked about with Cam Boozer and Caden Boozer signing with Samsung. That's what NIL was for. You got somebody who's famous, somebody who's going to be going to the NBA as a potential number 1 draft pick, definitely first rounder, of course, and they're already famous by being Carlos Boozer's kids. Those things make sense. The amount of money they're being thrown around for a starting five. I mean, again, we talked with Mike McAllister. He said about $9 million. It's kind of middle of the pack. I would kind of agree. I think it's a little bit of a, I would say, a crowded middle of the pack in the ACC. Like you're kind of splitting hairs. Like if you're spending 8.75 up to 9.25, like there's probably a bunch of teams in that world. And so you're building out these rosters that, your entire starting five is like million dollar type players. And then you got to build out your bench. And then all of a sudden you're up into that $9-10 million range. And you're seeing teams that are just average. And you're not getting your bang for your buck in a sense. Basketball has to find a way to figure that out a little bit more. And coaches have to be a little bit smarter. Like when you go out and you really want a center or you really want a power forward, guess what? You can go out there and grab multiple players at a better number and have more depth and have a better team. That's still a thing in college basketball's teams, but you can't miss on point guard. Point guard is where you can make the biggest impact. You can have a guy that you can lean on for 7 minutes a night, and you're going to get what you paid for. And that's where teams can make a big difference. It's all in the roster building mindset, but it's all in a world where these agents are continuing to advise these players on what to do. And I think for some players, it's going to be about money. For some players, they're going to feel disrespected by the amount of money they get offered by whatever team they're on. But I would also argue and encourage, and in football, it's a little easier. Hey, you can go make a decent amount of money and you can play for the school you want to. Basketball, sometimes it's such life-changing money that you just can't say no. And it just almost seems like there needs to be some sort of finer line with that when it comes to hoops. So as always, we'll continue to keep a close eye on it all across the ever-evolving landscape of college athletics, and we'll be keeping a close eye on the ACC tournament. 4 games today. We'll be here 8 to 9 a.m. Central on Thursday to react to it all as the ACC tournament continues to unfold. So we appreciate all of you guys for watching on All Access AM. Please hit that subscribe button and support our sponsors. And thank you to Mike McAllister for joining us on the show today. I'm Billy Embody. We'll catch you next time on another edition of All Access AM.